Okey-doke. I know much better than people's cookies and coffee and tea at 2 in the afternoon. Thank you all very much for coming. Before I begin, given what happened in rural Colorado, I thought we would just take a second in silence and remember those poor folks, their families, their loved ones, their friends and neighbors, and remember them in silence. Okay, the Patriot Act, 11 years later. I have to say I was somewhat surprised that you all chose this topic, although it's a favorite topic of the ACLU. But as a volunteer speaker for the ACLU, I have to tell you at the get-go that I am not a lawyer. And you can hold your applause. The second thing I need to tell you is the mission of the ACLU of Colorado. And in hearing it, you will understand why the ACLU is so interested in the Patriot Act and the updates in the Patriot Act. The mission of the ACLU of Colorado is to protect, defend, and extend the civil rights and civil liberties of all people in Colorado through litigation, education, and advocacy. Litigation, I think we all know what that is. Education, I hope we all know what that is. Advocacy is the work they do with legislators prior to bills being introduced. But let's go back to the beginning. The mission of the ACLU is to protect, defend, and extend. From whom are they protecting and defending us from? This is a working lunch. From whom? Government! Government, good job. I forgot my rewards here. Government. From government. They are protecting us from government. Extending, to protect, defend, and extend the civil rights and civil liberties. By the way, where would you direct me to find out what my civil rights and civil liberties are? Is this a tag team? The Constitution and what else? Bill of Rights. I'm going to go this way. Bill of Rights. Yes, I got to her. The Bill of Rights. Absolutely. So, protect, defend, and extend. If the Bill of Rights applies to everyone, who's the ACLU extending them to? You sure about that? Trying. Trying is a good word. In all its multiple meanings, it is trying. Exactly. Extending civil rights. Certainly gays, lesbians, transgender people. Certainly interracial marriages. Certainly slaves. Certainly women in their right to vote. These were not all civil rights that were extended immediately, correct? Okay, the Patriot Act. May I ask how many have read the 300-page document? In its entirety? Very good. Back here, we have a gentleman back here. Pass that on back. And there was someone over here. You already have, you can have another one. No, I'm not going to ask him how long it took him to read it, but I will tell you that since it's been written, it has been revised several times. And so the ACLU is interested in this. Do you feel that you've been safer? So, to better understand the ACLU's unwavering interest in the Patriot Act, it's very useful to also understand that the ACLU firmly believes that ignoring your civil rights and civil liberties, we do so at our own peril. And we do so even if there is another social good that's pulling at us to suspend our civil rights and civil liberties. So how did this all start with the ACLU? A little history, a little U.S. history. World War I began the largest anti-war protest in the world at that time. And it was because the U.S. was entering World War I. In America, the Palmer raids, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Palmer raids, they were alive and well. This was our Attorney General. And if you were a foreigner, he was raiding your living space and deporting you or putting you in jail. We had the Sedition Act back in the in the early 1900s, which allowed you to be jailed and imprisoned for speaking out against the government. It wasn't the first time we had a Sedition Act. When was the first time? Adams. Who said Adams? Okay. We had that Sedition Act, but we didn't learn then, so we had another one. Pass that to the gentleman back there. Thank you. Very well informed group. In addition to the Sedition Act and the Palmer raids, we had this wonderful thing called the American Protective League. I would be very surprised if anybody knows about the American Protective League. Oh, surprise me. Okay. Government-sponsored program that encouraged us to spy on our neighbors, and especially foreigners or suspiciously free-thinking types. Remember the American Protective League, because we're going to come back to that.
You're talking about the Soviet Union, not about the U.S., right?
Oh, we're talking about the U.S. Thank you, thank you. It was during this time, 1920s, that the American Civil Liberties Union was begun. It has been considered by historians as the most totalitarian period in U.S. history. Roger Baldwin, Crystal Eastman, and a whole slew of other folks got together. And I think it's important to remember that this whole slew of folks that got together and founded the ACLU came from many walks of life. Unitarians, Jewish people, Quakers, Methodists. These were all founding members of the ACLU. So I always smile when people say, oh, that heathenist group. They certainly, at their foundation, were not that at all. What brought them together was a tremendous sense of social justice. Crystal Eastman was a noted attorney long before women had the right to vote. Roger Baldwin was a community organizer. He was a social activist. He was a social worker by training. So when they came together, litigation was not on the radar. They thought that if you educated people, you could change their minds. So, but Crystal Eastman was an attorney. She was a labor union attorney. Labor unions were quite strong then. So here they are at a time when the Supreme Court, if you can believe this, never entertained a freedom of speech case by 1920. Did not even consider it. So, in addition to being somewhat skeptical of the courts, because the lower courts and the higher courts did not entertain freedom of speech case, in forming the ACLU, they decided they would use litigation. Why would they choose litigation? What was their interest? Their interest was in defending First Amendment rights. Why? The anti-war protesters were being jailed for distributing anti-war literature. They were speaking out against the government. Foreigners were being deported. Their interest was in protecting First Amendment rights, due process rights, privacy rights, and equal protection. So, in case you have forgotten, that's your 4th, 1st, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And I will read to you, because when we talk about the Patriot Act, I'm going to focus just on 2 portions of the Patriot Act, not even 2 portions, 2 small pieces. You can't update this puppy in an hour. But I can focus on a portion portion of it that I think would be of tremendous interest to you all, which is warrantless debt collection on U.S. citizens that's going on right now. The Fourth Amendment, in case you don't have memory, I don't, the right of people to be secure in their homes, to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Against what? Against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued, but upon probable cause. Probable cause is a legal standard supported by oath and affirmation. That means somebody is swearing and they're going to sign it, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. That is your Fourth Amendment right. Okay? So, here we are. Fast forward. They get together. They start the ACLU. And let me tell you, the ACLU is not a kumbaya organization. They have lots of disagreements, and lots of disagreements internally. They reflect the same schisms within their organization as the American people reflect amongst ourselves. This is probably not seen any more clearly than in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, when the ACLU is very busy defending the NAACP and simultaneously defending the Ku Klux Klan and their right to speak out, hold marches, and call for the abolition of the rights of Black Americans. Now, how can one organization have both of those people as a client? Why? What brings them together? They have rights. They both have protected civil rights and civil liberties. Remember, I said it is at our own peril that we ignore our civil rights and civil liberties in the name of some other social good. I think this example for the history of the ACLU, and it's replete with examples like this, demonstrates that. So here we go. So we talked today about an organization that understands and accepts that our Constitution and our Bill of Rights do not guarantee a democracy. They give democracy a chance. So, right now, the ACLU is the largest public interest law firm in the United States. It has 6,000 cases annually. It is nonpartisan and nonprofit. Consult any standard legal textbook, and 80% of the landmark cases the ACLU has been involved in. 80%. They are persistent little buggers. They work it and work it and work it. By 2003, they had a 67% success rate. So, in Colorado, I am not technologically savvy, so this is a real challenge for me, especially coming after people who know how to do Colorado so well. Here we are in Colorado. This tells you about us, and I am brought to you by the Speakers Bureau. So, everybody had a chance to look at that? There we are. I can't stand reading PowerPoints. The United States has a very long history of reducing our civil rights and civil liberties and then coming back. These are some examples of when our civil rights and civil liberties have been reduced. But the question is, will the pendulum swing back this time? We are now in the war against terror. The Patriot Act is supposed to protect us against the war on terror, right? It's supposed to make us safer, perhaps. But it is an ill-defined war. It is a never-ending war. How will we know when we've won it? So the ACLU has some concerns that this current war, the pendulum may not swing back. If you notice this on this list, our civil rights and civil liberties tended to be restored when the wars were over. Correct? If you have an endless war, it's a little nerve-wracking about when they might come back. Now, I realize that this audience is the first audience I've ever had where everybody's actually read the Patriot Act. But for those of us, and I think maybe they just wanted a bookmark, but I suspect that some of us don't know everything that's in it, and for the sake of moving this along, bear with me while I give you the highlights, and which will help focus us on warrantless data collection of our data right now. The Patriot Act provisions, as I said, are supposed to protect us. The Constitution requires safeguards when government is involved in surveillance, and certainly surveillance of U.S. citizens, right? We have some protections. I just read you the Fourth Amendment. But the Patriot Act gives government greater powers to wiretap, to monitor emails, to examine private medical, financial, library, and student records. Do you know that they actually are involved in sneaking and peeking into your houses, and you would never know that they were there? They can go into your homes, your offices, without notification, without probable cause, anywhere in the country, with a blank warrant, a blank, not person-specific, not item-specific, a blank warrant. Just on the say-so of an officer. This is not an officer of the court, this is FBI officers. To detain and deport immigrants and visitors indefinitely without judicial review, to spy on meetings of religious, free-thinking organizations, political interest groups. It drastically eliminates judicial oversight. How many branches of government do we have? They are the executive and right. And if you remove one of those three, you're in deep doo-doo. And they remove judicial. So, it has created a classification known as domestic terrorists. What's the difference between a domestic terrorist and a criminal? This is not a trick question.
Criminal has more rights.
This man has heard me speak before. The criminal has more rights. And what right does the criminal have that the terrorist doesn't have? Habeas corpus, bingo, big one. You know, when I first started speaking, I thought habeas corpus was coming out of chemistry class or biology class, but it's not that corpus. Habeas corpus is your right to know what you're being charged with, to be brought to a court, to have a judge tell you date, time, this is what you're charged with, and this is the crime. If you are tagged a domestic terrorist, you just gave that habeas corpus up. Habeas corpus becomes toast for terrorists. All right, moving on here. Tell you what else is going on with the Patriot Act. It offers the FBI and other groups to eavesdrop on lawyer-client conversations, to have secret military tribunals for suspected terrorists, and to find ways either, of course we don't do this anymore, but we outsource our torturing, to block normal freedom of information requests, and essentially allows the government to conduct its business in secret. Now, that drives the ACLU crazy, the secret. So, where are we right now? What's an update? The update is that the ACLU sees the Patriot Act as becoming completely entrenched in our way of life. After 11 years, it has taken hold. I would ask you again to think about the former slide and think about what freedom are you willing one of your civil liberties are you willing to give up? And if you are willing to give it up, how are you going to give it back? Yes?
Just out of curiosity, place President Obama's extension in context of what you're talking about, because Bush could have been furthermore on the right, more extreme in capacity. Obama extended three of the most, at least two of the most controversial ideas. Well, I know that, but I mean, two of them are really controversial. That's what. He only extended a stream that I was aware of. But anyway.
Hear me.
But the fact is that Obama basically was on the opposite side, and yet he extended it. So comment on that. If you have a
I will comment on it, and I will repeat what I said earlier. The ACLU is nonpartisan. It will oppose any administration, it will oppose any administration that tramples on our civil rights and civil liberties, and it will support any administration that enhances our civil rights and civil liberties. And you're correct, Obama did extend it in May, and it is extended for 4 years, and he extended 3, actually, of the most troubling provisions. When I said 4, I was thinking he extended it for 4 years, and there are 3 provisions. So erase that part on the tape where I heard 4. It's 3. 3 provisions. And these that I'm talking about today, which are national security letters and Section 215. Does that sound dry? It's not dry at all. Those are 2 that were extended. So, is that commenting on it enough?
Well, I was just, it's a very
I guess
controversial
no.
subject, the whole thing is, I'd love to hear more on this.
Okay, we'll get to it. And if we don't, we'll pick it up again. In an hour, you know, I feel like I'm condensing the Bible. How was that for this audience? Was that good? Is that good? Is that good? Okay, so here we are. The most significant change is that it's now entrenched. We have privacy rights in America based on the fundamental principle that our government must actually have probable cause, but that has gone by the wayside. We are required to have judicial review that has either been suspended or completely done away with. Completely done away with. We have people collecting data just in case. Just in case? Just in case what? Just in case. Because of technology, and I bow to all the technologically savvy people in the room because I know squat, but because of technology, they amass this data, and it is stored indefinitely, and it is shared. It is estimated that right now 34,000 government people have access to data that has been collected using warrantless data collection techniques on information about U.S. citizens. By the way, my fondest hope is that you believe nothing of what I'm telling you. Nothing. And research it yourself. Because what you will find out is that whatever I am telling you, as this gentleman alluded to, is just the tip of the iceberg. It is phenomenally complicated and always changing because it's always in the legal system. So don't believe a word I'm saying. To start you off, though, toward the end of the talk, I will distribute a reading list that I put together for you, which is quite varied and I think quite good. And it will, if you're interested, it'll expose you to things that you absolutely can't believe. And this isn't stuff just put out by the ACLU. This is out there. This is out there. Okay, so it's entrenched. The fundamental promise of probable cause warrants are no longer being used. Judges are removed. Technology allows huge amounts of data to be collected and stored indefinitely. It's shared. Remember when I pointed out to you the whole thought about the American Protective League? Well, here we are in 2012. How many of you know about the suspicious activity reporting. Let me share with you. This is the new American Protective League. We have it. It's alive and well, living here and everywhere else in the United States. And it's, again, a government-sponsored program. Copious note-taking shop. They are really going after it. The names of the program: eGuardian, Eagle Eyes, Patriot Act, See Something, Say Something. Are you familiar with those programs? Oh, come on, guys. I have more bookmarks. Yes, up. These programs were started to keep an eye out on people who take pictures, photographers, people who took pictures of buildings, people who took notes about buildings. The government is encouraging you to report this. Why is this? Because terrorists take pictures of buildings. Because terrorists take notes on buildings. Of course they do. So now, instead of the American Protective League, we have suspicious activity reporting. Look it up. Don't believe me. It's out there. So the Patriot Act was supposed to help us in this war on terror. The new global war on terror takes place everywhere. Right? How are you going to know when it's over? How are we going to know when it's over? Let me tell you, 2002 update. The Sixth Circuit Court, Bush had been involved with the secret deportations of immigrants. The Sixth Circuit Court said, no secret deportation hearings. And why? Because democracies die behind closed doors. Democracies die behind closed doors. But that was only the Sixth Circuit. For those of you who aren't lawyers, I'm sure you are aware that you can win in one court, lose in another, you can appeal, you can go up, you can go down. So, but that statement, democracies die behind closed doors, was heard by someone. And then the 9/11 Commission decided to set up something called the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, 2004. Sounds like a good idea. Oversee independent people looking at things. Guess what? 2004, where are we, 2012? How many times do you think that board's met? And this I won't retract. 0. 0. Bush could not get his appointment. Bush did not appoint the people he needed to appoint. Obama did not appoint until rather recently 3 of the 5 who needed to be appointed. So the boards never met. So there went our one sort of socially sanctioned independent oversight board. That's an update. So we have nobody doing anything. 0, zip, nada, squat. So, in short, the checks and balances aren't working so well. And they really don't work well when you get rid of judges. They really don't work well when you get rid of judges. So, here we are. What kind of country do we want to be? And again, I will ask you, what civil right and civil liberty are you willing to give up for real or perceived safety? And how do you get it back? And I forgot to move the slide. NSL letters. National security letters. These letters have been around for a super long time. And what they do is they allow an FBI agent, well, you can read it. So I'll pause a moment. So what happened was is that the Patriot Act expanded the power of the MSL letter. As I said, it's been around a long time. It's been around since about 1970. And they can issue a letter. They can give it to this gentleman right here. And you can see these letters online. You can't see to whom they're sent, but you can actually get a copy of the letter. And with it comes a gag order. And the gag order says, if you, miss, get this letter, and I'm asking you for phone information, medical records, I'm asking you for internet providers, I'm asking you for email lists, whatever I'm asking this young lady for, she has to give it to me, and she's issued a gag order. And the gag order says she cannot tell a soul, not a soul, that she is doing this, that she is pulling these data from her computer. Okay? Pesky little things, these national security letters. Very pesky. Yes. Excuse me? Okay, the question was, have I run into people who have received it? And of course, since everybody's under a gag order, let me say this. I have spoken to groups and groups of lawyers. And here's what a lawyer will say. Yes, I am very familiar with that. Blink, blink. So yes, I do know people who have received these letters. I don't know them. I've spoken, and they've been in the room. So here we are, national security letters. I'm going to have to move on, even though I gave up 5 minutes for cookies. Where's Jesse? I'm going to take my 5 minutes on the other end of this. So here we are. This is the kind of thing that they can collect. And this is what the ACLU thinks of them. Now, the problem is, not only is this person under a gag order, who is this young lady here who has received this letter, and she can't tell anyone, we find out that the gag order, in many of the legal cases that the ACLU has been involved with, are illegal. They're unconstitutional. What right are they violating? Free speech, your First Amendment right to speak. So, an update, and the update is even more troubling than the NSO letters themselves. How do we know this, given that they're gag orders? The following information I'm going to share with you, we know because there are congressional hearings and the Inspector General has to report to Congress, and it is from those documents that the following information comes. On the reading list that I've provided, you'll have this reference. So they find out that all these NSL letters that are going out, they literally don't know how many they've sent. They've sent them to people and demanded information from people who are not even suspects. They are going into groups that they are asking for that have nothing to do with an open investigation. Not even open an investigation, and they're collecting the staff. You wouldn't even know if your emails, you would have no idea if your phone records, you would have no idea if your medical records. You don't know. This all happens behind the scenes. You wouldn't know this. How do we know that it's happening? Because they're reporting to the Inspector General. This is happening. They audited 1,000 requests at one point. This is between the years of 2003 and 2005. They audited 1,000 requests, and they found over 20% of the audited files had unreported legal violations, and nothing happened to those FBI agents. No judge has to approve this. No judge has to approve this. An FBI agent has to say, I suspect there's no probable cause. The legal standards are gone, and this is going on. And again, it's out there. Do not believe me, research it. The report also documented, and this just drives me 6 ways plus Sunday. This is the 2007 report. It documented that it was not an effective tool for catching terrorists. But not to be deterred by facts. Never want to be deterred by facts. We now find out by 2009, there were 5 Inspector General's reports. 2009, okay, is the second one. We find out that 5 Inspector Generals now say that they're not an effective tool in monitoring or catching terrorists. So what do? We increase the number. Now that's a good use of our resources. In 2009, 5 Inspector General reports had made it known that they were not an effective tool in either monitoring or catching terrorists. So we increase it. The gag order, very interesting. It was finally first challenged in 2004. 2004, it was first challenged. And the ACLU brought a lawsuit against whom? Doe versus Holder. Why was it Doe? Because the guy had a gag order, couldn't identify himself, right? This was a landmark case. Landmark. After 6 years of litigating, this is what was learned. That the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, that the gag provisions in the NSL letters were unconstitutional, in part because they limited judicial review and they forced the courts to defer to the government's assertions about the necessity of the gag order, and because they denied the recipient the opportunity to exercise his right to freedom of speech. So, the case helped expose the secrecy of the NSL letters and resulted in First Amendment progress for entities receiving such requests. And now, because of this case, the government has to, when they issue to this young lady her NSL letter, they have to tell her she can contest the gag order in court, which will force the government to go to court and explain why she cannot disclose who she is or what she's doing. Even when it's lifted, this gentleman, Mr. Nichols, could not identify what was requested of him, so you wouldn't know what he turned over. It was his own ISP company. Section 215. Section 215. By the way, this article that I have listed down here from Wired.com, superb. Superb. It's also on the reading list. Section 215. How many of you committed Section 215? Patriot Act memory. Oh, you guys are slackers. Slackers on your civil rights and civil liberties. It's almost the same thing as the NSL, except Section 215 used to have a court, a judge, to review it. And it used to be reviewed through what was called the FISA court. That's a whole story unto itself, but suffice it to say this was a court that was originally set up to figure out how to get information on foreigners that you didn't want people to know you were getting information from. Patriot Act changed that. It's no longer just foreigners, it's you and me, kid. Now, under Section 215, the government can obtain orders for private records or items belonging to people who are not even under suspicion or involvement with terrorists or espionage, including U.S. citizens, lawful resident aliens, and no longer just foreigners, without a warrant, without showing probable cause. And the ACLU finds it most egregious because typically the people who are targeted for this are people who are engaged in free speech. It's truly amazing. So there have been many legal challenges And the first came from a fascinating group, Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders. Why? Because Section 215 is focusing on communication internationally. Well, why in the world would Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders be? And what's their interest in this? They're international organizations, they're helping people, and if you think about it, who are they working with? They're working with people who know that the United States has the Patriot Act, Section 215. Why would I want to turn over to you in an email exchange some information about some American citizen that I have captured over here if I know your government is going to track it? Well, either you want me to do the work with Amnesty International or you don't. So the legal question was, how can we challenge this? It's fascinating. Of course, they couldn't challenge it the first time they went to court. Why couldn't they challenge it? There's a thing called standing. Well, if you can't prove your information was collected, how can you go to court and claim anything? You can't. So now, after 6 years of fighting in court about this, in 2011, they finally won standing. You talk about tenacious. The ACLU is tenacious. And they pick away at these. So now, finally, we get some standing. Udall and Wyden, 2 senators. This was the only thing in preparing my comments today that gave me hope. 2 senators, and this is on the reading list too, you'll have this, have sent a letter to Holder saying, we think that Section 215 is being interpreted secretly by the Obama administration, and we want to know how they're interpreting it. We think they're doing even more than we think they think they're doing. So turn that information over to us. This went out 3 months ago. The Obama administration hasn't responded. The reason that gives me some hope is that these 2 gentlemen sit on the Intelligence Committee, and they have high security clearance, and they have access to all sorts of things. So the ACLU is really picking up on this request of theirs to disclose this information. In the reading list, when I had mentioned that the normal request for freedom of information is being stalled, the ACLU can work as long as 6 or 7 years trying to get documents under freedom of information and eventually having to sue. So when people say, you know, there's not much going on with the Patriot Act, there's a lot going on with the Patriot Act. It just takes a long time to get it through the courts. And the courts aren't too keen on entertaining it. I'm going to finish my prepared remarks with a talk about, hold on, I have another slide here, I'm sure. Maybe I don't. Hey, maybe I don't. Let's go back. I'm going to talk about David House. And when I talk about David House, my good friend and the Speakers Bureau coordinator for Colorado ACLU, John Scott back there, is going to start handing out some information, the bibliography, and also just because personally I'm so interested in Gitmo, some information on Gitmo prisoners. And this is his lovely partner, Kate, helping him. David House is a fascinating case. And this is coming under Section 215, and it was just recently won, so this is an update. How many of you know David House? Oh, come on. David House is a good guy. David House is coming back from a vacation. David House gets stopped at the airport. David House's computer gets taken. His camera gets taken. His little flash drives get taken. David House gets taken. And David House gets held at the border. Now, is this a typical check me at the border routine? No, not might come to you who David House is.
Jack Stevens.
How many of you recognize the name Bradley Manning? Oh, okay. Bradley Manning. Share with somebody who Bradley Manning is. One of you. Yes, who's Bradley Manning? We got. Excuse me?
He's the private that helped WikiLeaks.
He is the private who helped WikiLeaks. Okay. So, Bradley Manning. Okay. David House. Back to David House. So he's stuck there, and they have all his stuff, and they have all his stuff for a long time. And guess what? Guess who David House is? He's the person who put up the support network for Bradley Manning. Well, how did they know that? It's the Border Patrol. How do they know that you aren't supporting? How do they know I'm not supporting? Maybe they know that, maybe they don't. Anyway, he gets pulled, they take all his stuff. He claims foul play. Why did he get stopped? Why did his stuff get taken? Why did they search? Why did they keep all his information? Yes? Excuse me? Well, but we don't. The ACLU took the case, and the ACLU at this point doesn't know. But the wonderful thing about David House is that in taking his case, the judge did rule, and I'm going to read to you his ruling, which is just amazing. The court held that the government does not need suspicion to search a laptop at a border. It also held that the government's power to search is not limitless. Then it goes on to say, the initial search and seizure occurred at the border does not strip House of his First Amendment rights. So you understand the relationship between the First Amendment and the suspicion that people are getting searched and their private information is getting searched because of their First Amendment right to speak. That House, it does not strip House of his First Amendment rights, particularly given the allegation in the complaint that he was targeted specifically because of his association with the support network. The judge acknowledged the complainant's allegation that the search of House's laptop resulted in the disclosure of the support network supporters' internal communications, and that these disclosures, and this is key, will deter people in the future from supporting or participating. What is the judge worried about? Suppression of First Amendment rights. So I will end by saying that no battle for our civil rights, our civil liberties, is won forever. No battle is won forever. And as John Hand, who was a judge during World War II, said, I often wonder whether we do not rest our hopes too much upon constitutions, upon laws, upon courts. These are false hopes. Believe me, these are false hopes. Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women, and when it dies there, no court, no constitution, no law can save it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this. I'm just you are a sociologist, and you're a sociologist by training.
I am a researcher by training.
Okay, sure. No, just on the issue of my admiration to Lady Liberty. To what extent, because what I'm basically here is, I see from my own experience in Africa. I came back from Nigeria recently, and I see the struggle between free common goods and liberty. Which one comes? Because I see a struggle, a kind of a tension between our common good as a community, a community of people who want to have freedom, freedom to own guns, freedom to do all that stuff, and then my liberty. And when there's a kind of a conflict, when my liberty begins to hurt other people, how do you differentiate? How do you make sure that common good is protected? Because as a matter of fact, isn't it true that I cannot actually have freedom if I don't have, if my common good is not safeguarded, which means if America is Somalia, we cannot actually speak of liberty, we cannot have freedom because it's anarchy, because everybody has that here. Individual liberty is fighting against individual liberty. So when we have individual freedom fighting against common good, and the freedom cannot flourish when there's no common good. There's no point here. So how do you differentiate? Because in a wider American setting, I understand that I agree with you. Yes, there's abuses. You know, there are many abuses. I was stop in Arizona on my way from Stanford, but this one said, you look suspicious. I gave him my Stanford ID, he apologized. That's a, okay, I was angry, I was very angry because of that kind of incident. But there are other genuine concerns, you know. If you know that somebody has an email to go and kill 6 million Jews, and you have access to that information, would that constitute a violation of liberty, of freedom of privacy?
Okay, so your question is how to balance individual freedom and the community good, because the individual freedom can only demonstrate itself when there is
Common good is
common good. And the ACLU would remind everyone that their interest in this and why the First, Fourth, 14th, and 15th Amendments are so key is not only because it's a democracy, but because of the rule of law. We are a nation of laws. If you give up your liberty, or if it is taken away from you, who does that? Is that the terrorists, or is that our government who has suspended those? Who suspends your civil rights and civil liberties? Do we look back at the times when they have been suspended and think of ourselves, those were our proudest moments? We did a good job.
As a humanist, I would answer my response. I would say that human dignity is prior to the law. Human dignity is prior to the law because we have had in the past where law, rule of law was used to justify slavery, justify abuse of women, justify the refusal of people from having a same-sex marriage or whatever it may be. The law became an instrument of oppression as well. So if you say we have rule of law, then as someone who is a civil liberty like you will say, but the law is oppressive. It becomes an instrument of oppression.
To protect, defend, and extend. And you can only extend it through the rule of law.
Has the ACLU ever taken cases relating
The question is, does the ACLU address the issue of the Second Amendment, which is guns? And thank you, God, they do not. They do not take on the issue of the Second Amendment primarily. Why? Because they feel that it has been addressed in by the Constitution, and that the Constitution stands clear on this matter. Yes, in the back.
Can you propose a theory as to why the fourth estate, the media, is not covering what you covered today?
The question is, can I speculate on why the media chooses not to cover perhaps the updates to the Patriot Act today? And I have no comment on that. This lady here.
So I recently, well, a couple of years ago, took a tour of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and they were talking about fingerprinting in their database. And they said that if they had been in some place, like someone's home because they'd been burglarized, and at that point they collected all the fingerprints from the home, they would then be keeping all of those fingerprints, independent of whether some belonged to the burglar or to the homeowner. Was that, do you think, under the Patriot Act?
The question is that this lady had been on a tour of the FBI and learned that they collect and store all fingerprints when a home has been burglarized, whether or not the fingerprints belong to the members of the household or whomever, and they are stored indefinitely. And is that related to the Patriot Act? And my answer to that is I do not know.
I'm not a veteran. I'm part of the Iraq Veterans where we've had a lot of experiencing like really strange happenstances. People, train trips or like bus trips. People like police meeting a member of ours around the country. Knowing their name, knowing exactly who they are. These people have to know like background. We've had surveillance. And so, like, can you speak to activism and organizing and like what that means for people who are, especially the younger generation, who are really, you know, at least in the Occupy movement, you can say we've seen something from the Tea Party, but there's these different elements that have been. It seems more activism is happening. So I guess could you speak to that and what and how this relates and maybe how we should all talk about it together.
Okay, I want to get back to this lady's question about the FBI. If you would like me to look that up and get back to you.
Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah, but if you would want me to do that, I'm very responsible. Give me your email address, I'll look it up, I'll check with the ACLU office and get back to you. So at the end, if you want me to do that. To the gentleman question in the back, he's a veteran involved in activism, and you would like me to comment on the growing number of people who are, young people who are involved in activism and whether or not we should all get together?
Well, just about activism in general and how the Patriot Act is really, targeting
the concern and this thing with David House, the reason that was such an important win at this point is that it will allow the ACLU, who is Representative House, to, under the Freedom of Information and as part of the ongoing court investigation, find out how he was targeted. Somebody asked earlier, how did they know to stop him? That's part of the investigation. And did it come because of one of these huge data mining dumps? And how was it that they knew who he was to stop him and to take his stuff? The ACLU is concerned that there is a tremendous correlation between Fourth Amendment violations and First Amendment execution of your right to free speech. And thankfully, we do not have the Sedition Act alive and well currently, so there shouldn't be such a strong correlation. To the other point, I won't comment.
I have a sense, I think, from actually listening to ones about Patriot Act and the Libertarian Party. I'm wondering how it might affect the less
Okay. The question is about the Patriot Act and how that affects people who are atheists, and I'm not sure what what. I need some transition sentences.
If it does, I mean, how does it affect religious freedom?
Because, the question is, how does the Patriot Act impact religious freedom? I did bring with me, because people don't believe me, samples of the Denver spy files. That was a big case that happened here in the early part of 2000, and where we have redacted, under Freedom of Information, we got the redacted reports from the federal government about who they were spying on, and they do spy on religious organizations, pacifists, vegans, anybody who's a little out there, guys. And if you're a vegan, you're out there. So eat meat. That's the takeaway from this, eat meat. And I am way past time. Am I? We are on, I got a few more minutes because we have a few more minutes. Yes.
I would like to thank the ACLU for something that affected my family. It wasn't it was a very personal thing. My daughter and her living boyfriend, who had fathered her child, wanted to get married. They are not religious. They went to the marriage license bureau here in Grand Junction to get married, and were told they would have to take an oath under God. They refused and were told they could not get their marriage license. They refused to get married under those circumstances.
Good for them.
My daughter came to me with this, knowing that I had been a member of the ACLU for some years, and asked if there was something that could be done about it. So I wrote to the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which I know pretty well, and they contacted an ACLU they got married.
Good for them.
That, I have no idea whether that still prevails.
Well, I will take that thank you back to the office. Okay, one more, two more. Can we have two more?
We got it already.
Oh, one more.
Is it safe to assume that every single thing we do on the computer, internet is open to government suspicion of?
Yes. The question is, should we assume that everything on our computers is open to another set of eyes? And the answer is yes. And I have to stop and I'll be outside, and thank you all very much.